IVM.
Hi, I'm Utsav, a behavior researcher by training and a slow traveler by passion. Postcards from Nowhere is a travel podcast where I condense a decade of travel experiences and explore not just the where, but also the why and how to travel. My stories emerge from slow traveling the less explored parts of the world: Bosnia and Herzegovina, Armenia, Uzbekistan, and even China. At the end of each story, I give practical tips and new ideas about how to travel better.
This week, in the fourth episode of the series Fabulous Foods, we travel from the coast of Portugal to the coast of Goa and discover a fast disappearing musical tradition which is at the heart of almost all food practices within India. On the night of September 3rd, 1758, King Jospeh I was riding in an unmarked carriage on a secondary, unfrequented road on the outskirts of Lisbon. About 3 years ago, a massive earthquake had destroyed his palace. He had since taken refuge in a tent on the outskirts of the city. The king was returning after an evening with his mistress. Somewhere along the way, 2 or 3 men intercepted the carriage and fired on its occupants. Joseph I was shot in the arm and his driver was badly wounded. But both survived. A few days later, 2 men were arrested for the shootings and tortured. The men confessed their guilt and stated that they were following the orders of the Tavora family, who were plotting to put the Duke of Aveiro on the throne. Most of the Tavora and Aveiro families were publicly tortured and executed on January 13, 1759, in a field near Lisbon. Afterwards, the ground was salted to prevent future growth of vegetation. To this day in this location, there remains an alley called Beco do Chão Salgado, Alley of the Salted Ground. On its corner stands a shame memorial with an inscription just below waist height. But there is yet another thing that the Tavora family must have a shame memorial for. Francisco de Tavora was the ancestor of the same family which was involved in the assassination attempt. Francisco was designated first Count of Alvor and also happened to be the governor of Portuguese India stationed in Goa. On June 27, 1684, he had decreed that the locals should speak the Portuguese language. Additionally, the parish priest and school teachers should teach children the Christian doctrine in the same language. He forbade the use of Konkani, and penalties for violation would mean imprisonment. They wanted the native Catholic Goans to identify fully with the Portuguese Empire. This went on for centuries, and by 1812, the children were forbidden from speaking Konkani in the school premises. Even after 4.5 centuries of Portuguese rule, not even 2% of the Goans identified Portuguese as their mother tongue. The colonial project had completely failed, but the banning in 1684 had an unusual impact. The local Christians started missing their songs at their weddings and other festivals. So they invited their Hindu neighbors to sing for them. This enraged the Portuguese missionaries, which prompted them to ban the practice of singing Konkani songs altogether. This is the voice of Saraswati Datta Sawant. Had she been singing this song during Portuguese rule, she would have been imprisoned. However, her song is far from rebellious or seditious. She's in fact singing a very specific genre of music, which is fast disappearing from the landscape of Goa. Listen again carefully. Devoid of any musical instruments, the song is sung to the rhythm of the turning of the grinding stone, synchronized with the singer's body movements. Yes, you heard that right. Grinding stones or chakki in India. These songs are mostly monophonic or a single voice singing alone. Grinding was a routine everyday activity that was forced upon the daughter-in-law of the household. The songs are known as ovios. An old Konkani proverb says, Datar baslear ovio yeta. Roughly translated, it means sit at the grinding stone and a song will emerge. When you live an isolated life away from your parents and brothers and sisters, the grinding stone becomes your only friend. When you're married off at a tender age of 7 or 8 with no choice of meeting a beloved only brother for years, the grinding stone becomes your only confidant. These songs and stories are a vehicle of pain, isolation, anger, despair, and frustration. Another reason for using only grindstone sounds was that rural women in a lot of Goan households were forbidden to touch musical instruments that contained movable metal parts. In the song you just heard, the woman weeps on seeing her brother in the bazaar. She tells her brother of her plight, but he says that there is nothing he can do except come and take her home during the Ganesh festival. Listen to another song, this time by Subhadra Arjun Gavas. The song narrates the story of a brother visiting her sister at her in-laws' home. He's appalled to see her slaving away and remarks that how she was free as a bird in her maternal home. The sister-in-law hears of this exchange and asks the woman not to go back to her maternal home with her brother. The sister-in-law creates this excuse about heavy rains and dangerous creatures on the road. Her brother departs without taking her along. When he arrives, the mother asks about her daughter. The brother says that she is so happy at her in-laws' place that she does not want to return. Not all songs are personal experiences. Many carry the legends as well. In the incredible story of Jarasandha, 2 half babies are born to the 2 queens of a king. The 2 halves are quickly sewn together, but the resulting prince turns out to be a really cruel king. A mere child then, Lord Krishna comes to save the people. His birth mother Devaki comes looking for him, and when she finally finds him in Goa, her breasts overflow with the milk of maternal love. That milk then turns into the waterfall which we now know as the famed Dudhsagar Falls in Goa. Whether the songs and stories were legends or personal experiences, the OVOs formed a very intrinsic part of the lonely woman's existence. While the key reason for their disappearance is the availability of grain grinding mills, what probably still needs to change is the level of exploitation Indian women face even today. In her book, Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh Khan, the economist Shreyana Bhattacharya beautifully encapsulates how the Indian woman is lonely in the bedroom, lonely in the kitchen, and lonely at the workplace. She is constantly in search of intimacy and independence, even after supposedly being liberated in urban spaces. As we travel, let one of the primary parameters of how developed a place is be how well it treats its women.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Utsav Memory on Twitter and YVTravel42 on Instagram.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Think Fast, Suchita invited me to talk about the evolution of the audio industry. And besides the audio industry, we talked about a whole bunch of other things like the Zomato-Blinkit potential merger, the Mumbai 2050 climate plan, and a whole bunch of other things. Fun episode, do check that out. On Press Decode, Zara Vakta, Prafula and Nivedita discuss the accuracy of the Kashmir files and associated movie politics. On The Longest Constitution, Priya examines the issue of livelihood along with why women aren't a part of parliament. On Say No to Drama, Chetna explains why you should celebrate filing your income tax rather than feeling bad about it. And on All Things Policy, the Takshashila folk discuss India's reserves of oil in light of the oil supply shock created by the Russia-Ukraine war. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. Also, remember, we're on YouTube. You can check us out on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube and get a list of all the YouTube channels we have active at this point. I'd also like to make a quick note that we're doing a small listener survey, and it would really help us if you could fill that out. You can go to ivmpodcast.com/survey. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance and India Water Portal. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Ladies, I'm sure you will relate to it if I say that we are constantly busy with work, studies, cooking, and whatnot. And amidst all of this, we often forget an important element that needs our desperate attention: finance. So here we are, bringing to you SBI Life presents A Sip of Finance, a women-exclusive podcast where we will teach you how to manage personal finances in a simple and straightforward way with your host, Priyanka Acharya, a finance expert who's been in the industry for 14 plus years. And not just in English, but in 7 more languages. So tune in every Tuesday for fresh episodes on the IVM Podcast Network and all major podcast streaming platforms.